Speaker number 4, Jenn Podmore Russell. Jenn is a systems thinker and a purpose-driven operator. She leads with clarity in complex environments. But tonight she brings us into the quiet moments that shape leadership from the inside out. Number 4, our keynote for the evening, Jenn Podmore Russell.
No pressure. I always loved in elementary school that I had a name later in the alphabet because it meant I didn't have to go first. And I think tonight I was really wishing I was an Anderson or Brooks or someone else. This is my security blanket. I'm not reading a speech, but I did want to make sure that I had some thoughts to be able to share with you. This is also really hard for me. I really don't like talking about myself. I dislike even getting up in public speaking, but I'm really excited to be here. And so it did really force me to think more about, my journey in real estate over the last 25 years and who I am. And so the theme of tonight, and certainly the theme of my entire career, has always been around curiosity. When I shape back and I look back, there's a lot of other things that have shaped my experiences, certainly at every point of sort of big change in my life and certainly in the career life. I think I was faced with the same thought that Ryan had of like, what am I doing? And that was usually the thought that started to provoke more introspection of myself instead of others. But certainly, some people would say that I was born into this industry, and that's certainly true. My dad is David Podmore and founded Concert Properties with Jack Poole. But I didn't know that growing up, that I was born into the real estate industry. In fact, I got my start in real estate because I was trying to prove my dad wrong. That there was a couple of different internships opportunities, and my dad said that I should really go into real estate. And like every good 21-year-old who was going through university in a liberal arts designation, I really needed to tell him that he didn't know what I was going to do, that I was going to do it. So I really wanted to go and work in ski resorts, and I thought that I was going to go into ski management. I'd already had I was a patroller and I had my level 3, and I was going to go, and that was the pathway at the time of going into ski resort management, was you were an instructor, because that's totally how you run a billion-dollar operation. And so he thought that was a bad idea. He presented me with data, which was really smart, knowing me, of that every single ski resort in British Columbia had gone bankrupt at least once, and most twice, with the exception of one, which is Silver Star, which still has never gone into bankruptcy, or any sort of distress. So I got a job with Colliers. I applied to them. In the theme of last names, I didn't tell them I was a Podmore because I was pretty sure if I did that I would get the internship, and I got the internship, and I got to work at Colliers. And so that started in Victoria, and that internship turned into a full-time career, and I was able to work as the research and heading up research for Western Canada. And that kind of gets into where curiosity taught me how to work in real estate, but also taught me that I really loved real estate. As a research person and a research analyst, we didn't have systems. We weren't even on Excel yet, which totally dates me in terms of my age. But we had talked about building these things called CRMs, and we were starting to do that. But really, the way that you found out who had transacted something, who had leased something, why something had sold, was that you picked up the phone and you built relationships and you started asking. And so my career, certainly in the first year, was every time a leasing agent or a sales agent or Avatar would say, hey, we want to know what that sold for, I would just build relationships. And I'd pick up phones and I would ask them. But I wouldn't stop with the thank you for the comp. You'd start to ask why. Well, why did they buy that, or why did they lease that, and what was going on? And you'd find out from the brokers more and more around there was 5 other offers. And 2 of them were coming from Asian firms, and 1 was from an American. And what you realized, and what I didn't realize at the time, was I was learning all about how the city was being built, what the motivations were, how companies were growing, who was interested in coming to Vancouver. And the biggest part of that was that the knowledge only had power because you share it. And I know that we've talked about that there's power in knowledge, but it really is only when you continue to share it. And so I'd take what I learned and I would go back to the broker, I'd go back to others, and I would just start sharing it, and they would share more, and it just kind of perpetuated this ability for me to start to understand how cities were growing. And then I would go and I would write the research report that talked about the 6.3% vacancy and all that. But that's really what got me started in life. or certainly of my life in real estate. And I think that that's partly luck. That's partly recognizing the opportunities. And in terms of recognizing the opportunities, when it was time to go from Colliers, one of the things I really loved was about residential development. And at the time, CMHC was reporting, and they would report on completions, and we were getting into pre-sales, and it was all data, and it didn't really tell you why someone was buying something or why things were growing or where the city was shaping. And so, with that and with that interest, I figured that I would answer the recruiter's call for a marketing job at BOZA. And Daryl Simpson doesn't remember this as much, but I very, very much remember that it was down to me and one other candidate. And Daryl said, well, I want you to write me a marketing brief, which as a research person, I had no idea what a marketing brief was. But I went, and it was for a property in New West, and I went and I spent the weekend. And I dragged my husband at the time, or I think he was the boyfriend, but dragged him, and we sat and we looked at the coffee shop, and I watched who was coming in and who was going out. We walked around the neighborhood, and I learned more about what was there and what was coming and everything. And so I wrote this marketing brief, which really was a story about where I saw the evolution of New West and what the opportunities were and who was going to live there. But I didn't tell him a name. I didn't talk to him about how we were going to target those demographics. And he kind of pointed out after he read it that it was really, really good, but it wasn't a marketing brief. There was nothing that I didn't really understand what marketing was. And we got into a discussion around what I wanted to do. And the discussion was that what I wanted to do in terms of tracking and understanding cities and doing reports that I did and having those discussions around how you would design based on who's coming next was a job that didn't exist. And the best thing that happened to me at the time was that he explained that there was a firm that used to track the market, and that didn't exist anymore. And it gave me the courage to start MPC. So MPC was a software or a platform where we tracked and aggregated all of the data of every housing start across BC and Alberta. And we tracked that for developers and for banks and to help them underwrite it. And that created the next chance for me to be curious. Because once we gave that data to everyone, people asked our opinions of what does it mean and how do you design and what do you think about what's coming next. And so it sparked this next evolution of being curious. And that then sparked into an opportunity of what do we do with it, that we had grown to BC and Alberta, and how do we expand the platform? And Deloitte came knocking. Actually, another group came knocking first, but Deloitte came knocking and said that they wanted us to start the real estate company, or the real estate division of Deloitte. And I'm certainly not an accountant. We've established I'm not a marketer, but I was able to enter into Deloitte. We merged the company in, we became the consulting arm, and that was when they got to take my curiosity in real estate and really take it, for me at least, to the next level. And I got to go a bit more global. That with this curiosity and with the applied lessons of 15 years, I got to start applying it to what does it mean for transportation? Where would we put transportation lines? What does that mean for the housing that could come? How would you marry that housing development with the investment of transportation? I got to go down to the States and look at retail and start thinking about how retail would change. And what does that mean for a retail network? And how would you evolve that? And how would you think about that? And started applying it to strategies. And certainly, and Jack talked about not wanting to be a negligent dad, it was one of the best platforms that I could have. In the time that I was there, I got married, we had our first child, and when Gray was 4, I was lucky enough to be home, and I was able to go and pick her up from preschool. And when I went to pick her up, the teacher was really surprised to see me, and I asked how she was doing, and her teacher said, she's great, all things considering. And I was like, well, all things considering what? And she goes, well, the separation. And I was a little surprised, and I asked her what she meant by the separation. She explained to me that Gray explained to all of her class that her mom lives in a hotel during the week, and she stays with her dad. And that was when I canceled all my travel for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm pretty sure I showed up every single day and waved at the teacher. And it wasn't that I didn't love my career in real estate, and it wasn't that I didn't love the opportunities that Deloitte was giving me, but I realized then and there that I needed to make a decision of what comes next again, and that was sort of the what am I doing? And so I got to take the next year with Deloitte, and all I got to do was take the most interesting, most curious projects that I could find, and it gave me a chance to start working in Vancouver. We had our second child, and it really was time to leave Deloitte. And at that point, it was time to go over to Rennie. And Bob is someone, and Greg Zayati is someone. Greg's been one of my best friends. I don't even actually remember how I met him. And Bob has been in my life and our family's lives as long as I can remember. And it was just another evolution of being able to be curious. It was being able to be curious about a company that was growing at record speeds and how we would put systems and structures in place. It was the ability to look at the transformation of the real estate industry and what that meant next. And I got to work with people like Jack, and I also got to work with really good realtors, two of whom are here and were crazy enough to take us on as clients to sell homes for us. But that curiosity just kept going, and I think there's a number of lessons that you see. I haven't looked at any of this, but there's a lot of lessons that you learn from curiosity, and there's a lot of lessons I think you have to follow in it. One, in terms of following with curiosity, you have to share that knowledge. There's no way that you can build your thinking and build your understanding if you're not sharing what you've learned. And more importantly, that my dad always instilled in us is also giving credit to people that educated you. That you don't get to take all that knowledge and make it your own and profess that you're the expert. You have to really acknowledge how you're learning from everything. And that's been really, really pivotal in the steps of the career I got to take in the last 18 months with Inchkai. You also have to be able to and be willing to think like a computer, as Bob has taught us, and certainly taught me, instead of a book. A book has its conclusion completely written, and you just simply follow it to the end. A computer, every time you put new information in and you gain new information, you have to change your opinion in the outcome of what it is. And I think that that's a really important part of curiosity, especially as it comes to where we get to apply it on a daily basis at Inchkai, which is that we get to create communities. And not just communities, we get to create villages. And in order to do that, there's two things that you get to do, and that I get to do, and the team gets to do. But the first is that we actually get to listen to the land. We get to listen to the stories over 10,000 years. We get to understand what has happened there and what the history is, but also what the wisdom and the knowledge and the purpose of the land is. And then you get to listen to others of what a village would mean in terms of being able to resurrect and come back. And so when we get to start designing, whether it's Sanok or the next buildings, we start with just really gathering knowledge and understanding everything, as opposed to sort of a preconceived perception of what we need to build and how we bring people along to our vision. We really get to listen, and we get to actually say things that I love saying, which is, I don't know. And early in my career, it's I don't know, and I'll find out. And now I realize it's I don't know, and what do you think? And I don't know, and asking questions so that you can just keep shaping your understanding. And so where that gets to come full circle, or at least maybe not even full circle, but where we get to be in this moment in the next few years, is being able to really imagine not just the buildings that we're building, but we're now starting to think about what does a day in the life look like for every single guest that comes onto the land at Sanok. How do they start their day? What does it feel like to be able to jump onto the bridge and be able to have a commute downtown? What does it feel like when they see the trigons as they come back? Does that start to feel like home? Certainly if you go over the bridge at this time of day, you'll see just how the light is starting to hit it. But it's also about how you wind back down into the community, and how you ride your bike, and how you get lost in the art that's sitting in building and Tower 2, and that you keep finding something else and something different that reveals of it. And then you get lost in a conversation with your neighbors, and how we start thinking about retail that's going to be really different, that we don't have to hardscape it and have one CRU beside another CRU, but that as you walk all the way through the lobby of phase one of building 1, you actually just feel like you're simply walking through the village to grab your coffee or to grab your daily needs, and then continue on your day. So I apologize for taking the whole 10 minutes. I would like to just thank everyone at Inform for doing this. But I would just simply challenge everyone to be really curious. And I think it takes bravery to say that you don't know. It takes even more bravery to just sit and listen and not be forming your next thought of what comes forward. And I'd like to thank just everyone I've been able to work with over my career, who's just really spent more time teaching me than I've spent leading them.
Two takeaways from that for me. First one is, Daryl Simpson's not here, is he? That son of a gun. He's always looking for free work, isn't he? Secondly,
He got what he paid for.
I used to live on Bowen Island, and I got to commute every day back and forth on the ferry. Jenn's dad, David, was often on the ferry, and so the second takeaway for me is that isn't it funny how the apple is always trying to walk away from the tree? but it doesn't really happen. What I've known of you and the opportunities I got to sit down eating French fries with your dad on the Bowen Island Ferry was that sometimes strength doesn't always roar. I think your dad's very much indicative of that, and every time we've interacted, it's been very, very much the same. So thank you.